So for the third of my analysis videos, I'm going to do the Team Liquid Team Kill series from the weekend. So obviously, when you get small tournaments like this, you get certain team kill things that are going to happen when you have members of the same team who are there. So unfortunately, that was the case here. So we have RobAJG against the Hyped, who is of course one of the people who was at the event. I'm just gonna call him Rob, by the way. It's a little easier to say. One syllable as opposed to four. But yeah, so this is what happened. It was a really interesting series in a couple different ways. So I'm gonna get right into it. Of course, just want to let you know I'm really looking for feedback. I'm still trying to build this. You know, as a routine thing, I'm learning a lot about it. So I really want that feedback. And then also I just want to let you know, of course, that this is sponsored by Ink Gaming. There's information down below that you can check out. There's still a giveaway going on for just a couple more days, so check that out if you're interested and you want to get a chance to get some free swag from Ink Gaming. So let's get into the game. So a reminder, of course, all of this content in terms of the footage that ended up coming from the BTS team that put on the tournament this weekend. So they did absolutely spectacular job. Check them out. There'll be a link to that in the description as well. Taking a look at Rob's side here, we have a bounty hunter on his side. It's actually an interesting matchup because it's actually kind of an econ-focused mirror. Both players are in a 3-black deck that has a good number of gold synergies. We're going to actually talk about the compositions of the deck and doing some comparisons between them because I think that it's really interesting in this particular matchup. So in this situation, there's not a whole lot to be doing for the time being here. I mean, you could slay a creep and get 7 damage in if you're really anxious to get out of here, I guess, but that's not what's necessary. In this position, though, you can add a track onto that Sorlicon. There's probably no way for it to be punished, especially in red-black, or like you only have access to the black cards. Like they can't buff up the health in this position. Like you know that's gonna happen. Like they can't transfer it back to hand somehow. So that made a lot of sense to do. Get that extra gold. Hopefully pick up something sweet in the item deck right now. So not a whole lot of action there. Just a simple exchange. Get some nice options here though. Probably don't want the card draw for the time being, since you have a decent number of cards already. And we'll actually see over the course of the game that Rob has access to a good deal of card draw in his deck, so decides to go for a couple of items there from the center shop, and then ultimately buys up that plate mail. Or is that the barb mail? I apologize for it. The Legion Commander armor, as it is said. So, deploying, the question is where the Jamoy is going to be coming out, of course, as any of the 3 lanes are interesting for me. It's hard for me to talk about this from both sides. It's actually something that I think that casting Artifact is going to be really hard to do because there's so much going on and so many decisions happening from both sides that doing justice to both players is virtually impossible from my perspective. This was a really interesting decision in my mind of like, I'm not sure what the goal here was of launching that blue hero into the center lane, because part of my concern is that if your opponent picks up something, I guess that there's not a lot of ways to get punished necessarily, because if he gets matched up against that Beastmaster, which seems pretty likely, he can't get up to 8 attack very easily. But I just want to, this will be a moment that we come back to in the course of the analysis afterwards. How I tend to do this is that I just cast the match normally, try to get into that habit of doing the fluid analysis, and then I go backwards and do a really more detailed analysis of specifically what happened in these situations. And this is a moment here that I think is really interesting. So we have Hyped, of course, who opts to not play the Sucker Punch, but instead just opts for that Smeevil. Gives a nice little buff to our Beastmaster here. Deploys the Ironfall Goldmine on the side of Rob, which is nice. Unfortunately, couldn't get that out in turn 1, but gets it out now, which is nice. And it's always good to remember that one triggers after combat. It's always one that I find easy to forget, is that I see people places on the same lane. I'm like, oh, isn't that a mistake? Like, doesn't it trigger at the beginning of the round? But no, it doesn't. They're just looking at the decks now. We're gonna actually revisit this later, get a more in-depth look at the decks. I think that there's some interesting business going on here. One of the things that they're noting is that both players have access to Vesture of the Tyrant, which is a really, you know, banger of a card. That card slaps, as they say. And it is a 19 cost, 3 armor item, and it gives your tower 3 armor, and it gives your hero rapid deployment. And what that means is basically you can continually deploy into the lanes every time that it dies, really slows down any progress of your opponent, and there's just no way to really get around it other than like the brief moment of you kill the hero, maybe for the combat phase, and then you hit the tower, I guess, but it becomes so awkward to do. It has a really interesting play pattern. It's much better than it looked like initially to me. But okay, so Magnus is down here, unfortunate for him. The hand of Rob is not looking spectacular. It's kind of an awkward mix of different stuff, especially given the fact that there's just like poor mobility for these heroes. He ends up buying up a bunch of items out of the shop here. Actually, he doesn't. This is later on. He buys a bunch of items out of the shop. This turn, he didn't get a lot of gold, given the fact that basically he just fed a bunch, unfortunately. So now he has the option of where to assign his heroes. And it's important to know that in a deck with 2 bounty hunters, like, you are going to get just like a piss ton of gold in a lot of circumstances. Like, you just have access to tons and tons of it in many ways, because as soon as you get those tracks down, like it's like that's all you really need. And like, you definitely get to a maximum point when there's gold sort of stops mattering almost, because I mean, we've seen this in some of the previous videos. If you go back to my video that I did with Life Coach versus Feels Good Man, like, he just ran up the score in terms of gold counts. So anyway, deploying into this lane, we get to the good look at the assault ladders here. Not exactly what we need to be taking a look at. The Jamoy there, we have a good... he is continuing to survive. He was able to survive through that turn against the Beastmaster in the previous turn. The opponent did try to take him down, but didn't have a chance to do so. Has a few options here, though, on Rob's side of... Could be slaying this Meevil, I guess. That's a possible thing to do. The track is also very attractive here, given that you can actually... You get some gold in it, but it should be noted that we have a item card in the opponent's hand, which should be a bit of a red flag. Like, you can actually see that, of course, too, because if you're looking at it from Rob's perspective, it doesn't see what the card is, but it sees that there's a gold border on it, which indicates it's an item. And if you've been paying attention closely to the amount of gold that Hyped has, you saw that he actually spent 3 gold. 3 gold is most likely a potion or the healing, the Traveler's Cloak, rather. So that's kind of a critical number for it. That it can be a lot of different things, but that particular number is an important one, and kind of makes you not want to go all in on things. But I mean, like, even if you were to deploy, for instance, that track here, like, you expect that the Beastmaster is going to die eventually, hopefully. But I guess it's possible he just doesn't, given that he has that Stonewall Cloak. Just never dies. Is unfortunately more likely than it might seem. And that, we see a pretty big loss here of the Bounty Hunter dealing 10 damage to that measly little creep. Just soaking up tons of damage. This is one of the reasons why, for instance, we saw the Rob to use the battlefield control in the previous turn, and just really ineffective here. The Jamoy ends up going down. That first lane is not looking spectacular. Hyped here has a decision whether or not to go all in with the Oath. The Oath is a very powerful card. It only works when you have a black hero rather in lane, and how it operates is that it gives you extra attack on all of your units in lane while you have a black hero there, plus 4 attack, which is huge. But all of the time, it just shuts off you casting creeps and the spells in a given lane. Now, Hype does not opt to cast that yet. It's good to do that when you really feel like you have a good free lane to do it. Decides to play it cautious. Like, it's a card that's worth playing cautious for, because things can go really badly. But he does have the option here to deploy the Burning Oil. I did think that there was actually an opportunity earlier on in the turn that he could have done that at very little cost. I mean, like, hypothetically, this could have cost him an initiative to do this. It didn't end up working out that way, that it mattered very much, but it was actually a bit of a consideration that I think I'm surprised that he didn't take, because I always had the option, like the feeling of just getting cards out of your hand. But yeah, so this is the turn that he just kind of goes hog wild, buys up a bunch of stuff, including the Helm of a Dominator, which is a very powerful item. 19 cost. is a armor item. It gives 3 armor, and you can steal control of one of your opponent's creeps. Now, that sounds pretty busted, and it is in certain matchups, especially against, like, green decks, for example. But against the deck, this is one of the things that the commentators are talking about right now. Against Hype's deck, this isn't actually that exciting. So I think that this is another moment that I'm going to be returning to in the course of the game, because I think that this decision is actually quite the mistake, especially the way in which he bought the item. So we'll talk about that later. But this does end up leading to an interesting back and forth that we'll see here, where both of the players are now enticed to like, who's going to be playing their items first, because both players can see that that each one just dumped a bunch of gold, because also, I don't know if you noticed this, but there is a Helm of the Dominator in Hype's hand as well. Hype actually has that natively in his deck, while Rob just picked it up, got lucky. So, what do we do here? We have the Helm of the Dominator that we can play out. The issue with a card like this is that you kind of want to deploy it after your opponent has already played out an interesting unit. Now, this is a move here that the response from Rob surprises me. He opts to slay, which there's part of me that feels like one of the was what the commentators are commenting on right now, is this is like, well, this is a really good opportunity to put out that Helm of the Dominator, because there's not very many good creeps, as I mentioned, in Rob's deck. Like, that's like close to the ceiling of what you'll see. Like, maybe it's like the Tyler Estate Censor is better than that, but other than that, like that your quote-unquote Hellbell Crippler, the piggy, is about as good as you can get. So I'm surprised to see him do that. Now, it does avoid getting punished horribly. Maybe he was particularly playing around that Helm of the Dominator, in which case that was smart. But it's also like there were multiple 19 gold items, because it was possible for him to also have access to the Vesture of the Tyrant, of course, as well. Now, this is a great play that we have here from Hyped. He does set up a cross-board gank. Gank is a card that, over the course of the tournament, it became really obvious to me it is a high skill cap card, and to use it properly and finding the best positions to. I mean, sometimes it's just good. I mean, sometimes it's just great. Like in this particular situation, it was really solid, and I didn't take a genius to figure that out, especially with all of that armor. Makes it really easy to tank that hit from the Magnus, but it definitely is a card that, when it's hard to use it optimally, to set things up properly, because you have to think through the entire board, and it makes your own units much more vulnerable on the board that they're currently on, especially if we're using it cross-board like that. So, interesting usage there. But it doesn't end up working well. We do get a little bit of a battle here with the... first, we activate the Helm of the Dominator on Hype's side, pulls up that 2/2 onto the opponent's side. Now, Rob has the opportunity to respond by playing his own Helm of the Dominator, stealing that creep, and hoping to block the Debbie specifically to soak up a bunch of damage, or the Beastmaster with a secondary target. This was the worst outcome. Now, he does kill the creep, which is fine, but his tower takes so much damage here, and there's just nothing that he can do to stop it, which is pretty unfortunate. So, things are going kind of badly in this first lane for Rob. It's not totally unsalvageable, but the opponent's heroes are definitely growing kind of out of control, especially when you have a Helm, the Stonehall Cloak that's kind of going unanswered. You have this Beastmaster who's like been in that lane since turn 1 and just been growing and growing and growing, so that's been kind of problematic. This is where things go really bad, though. We have the opportunity here to just drop first a Payday on Hype's side, followed by the Oath. That hurts. that hurts a lot. And the thing about the Oath is this is a card that usually, like, there are certain cards, I mentioned this in a previous video, like there are certain cards or certain decks that can take Ancients. There are certain situations in which you can actually threaten an Ancient. The Oath allows you to do that, and you need to know whether you're playing a deck yourself or you're playing against a deck that has that capacity to quickly take an Ancient, because it makes a huge difference in what you have to do. Like, that center lane note, like, that's a concern, and especially given the fact that Rob doesn't have a lot of great tools for busting down the opponent's towers right now, and the opponent's towers are looking pretty healthy. Like, it's going to be hard to race that, even with them not being able to play any cards in the center lane, or any, rather, not any cards, but most cards into the center lane. So this is pretty scary. And right now, I mean, we have the Jamoy that's able to come in there to hopefully slow things down a little bit, but he's not even great at that task. Like, he does some stuff, like there's some cards that he has access to, but if you actually, we're going to look again at the composition of the deck, and there's just not a lot of blue cards that do a ton to slow this down, with just the exception of Dimensional Portal, if he's able to grab that. Now, we do have the Sniper who's coming in on the left lane. He is going to be able to play that Headshot, which is a really useful card to have access to in a situation like this. Be able to kill that Debbie, hopefully. I'm actually kind of interested about whether or not he should have been playing that Sniper into the second lane, hopefully to threaten the Sorla Khan, given the fact that that's like, if you kill the black hero in that center lane, then that's where things go. Like, you're able to turn things around there. But yeah, I mean, we get the Headshot off on the Debbie. That's nice. We also get the Vesture of the Tyrant out. Now, it is worth noting that the reason why he... I'm interested the reason he ordered things in this way, specifically, was to... He could have ordered it in a couple of different ways, actually, because given that he had that flask in hand, too. He's concerned about Assassinate, though, is what I was really trying to get to saying. Assassinate, 7 cost. This is Sniper's signature card. It deals 10 piercing damage to anything. But the reason why the Vesture of the Tyrant, it doesn't seem like it's great in that position, because what it does is it... it's piercing damage, so it doesn't matter whether or not he has that armor on the Beastmaster or not, but that gives him rapid deployment now, which is nice. So... given this series of operations, though, like, maybe he was trying to set up that Fountain Flask on the Debbie. I didn't catch what his max health was exactly, but I kind of feel like it would have been interesting to do the Fountain Flask first in order to play around that Assassinate. So maybe a bit of a sequencing error there. I might have to check back afterwards to see if I missed anything. We also get a steady stream of cards from that Omex arena. Now, he is going to kind of be running out of resources as things go on further. He does, though, have just a really high density of good improvements like this, so that he can still do stuff while he's on the Oath lane. It's also just been incredible of like how much more effectively he's been using his mana, given the fact that he's on a 2-faction deck, a 2-color deck, and his opponent is on a 3-color deck, and just is able to more smoothly cast all of his spells. So that's been something that's kind of been defining. I mean, also, we've been drawing a lot more cards on Rob's side, given the fact that he's in blue. There's a lot of card draw related options, but that has been... we have just a handful of nonsense, essentially. All of these green cards that just don't do a whole lot. More gold, though, on Rob's side, hoping to find that Vesture of the Tyrant on his own side. That could be really effective in slowing down some of these lanes. This Bounty Hunter, though, going to be harassed to the point of death. Has the option to slay, to keep him alive, but he would only die then to that burning oil there. I love the visual effect of the burning oil, honestly. This is actually an interesting little play of killing the creep there just to push maximum damage. And I think this is also... We're seeing here that Hyped has the capacity to pressure all 3 lanes, and that is a really potent mix if you're able to do that. It's hard to do, but because usually your opponent can force you out of one lane, and if you try to force yourself into a lane that your opponent is pushing you out of, you're just gonna like lose momentum because they already have like something set up. So on the rightmost lane, though, we like all 3 of these lanes do have serious threats that Rob has to respect. He has to worry about losing that Ancient in the middle lane. Like, there's just has to spread out his resources so thin, and that's particularly effective against these a deck that has the composition of what Rob is playing. I mentioned at the beginning that it is a 3 black, 1 blue, 1 green deck. So Magnus, the Jamoy, and then 2 Bounty Hunters and a Sniper. That really makes it very hard to use your resources well. So that's actually something that I might think about more in when I actually get into the beta and start playing Draft, especially, is that one of the recipes for actually winning against 3-faction decks as because they have a lot less flexibility of using their cards properly, so trying to play for 3 lanes becomes a lot better. Seraphin Shield is a card they're pulling up right here. Gives +2 attack and +2 armor, and then gives everything -2 attack, so it really slows things down to a glacial pace if you're able to launch it down. But we are seeing these, like, things are filling up in their item slots as both players have had access to just a ton of gold over the course of the game. So anytime that you deploy these things, they're going to be taking something else out. Dimensional Portal comes down in the second lane after that Satyr activation, which is going to help slow down that aggression. This is actually, I think, a mistake. There's part of me that wants to move Jamoy out of this center lane. I mean, just like have him die here. It is like almost like, because he's not going to do anything in this position exactly. Like, especially you spent the Dimensional Portal. It's actually the only Dimensional Portal you have in the deck. Like, I don't know exactly what you're going to be doing from this lane. I guess just drawing cards, I suppose. So I don't know. I'm unsure about that. Steel Strength does set up the potential for a kill on that Debbie, which is appealing. We are going to load things up. That Seraphim Shield is good in this instance, but that actually causes some potential problems down the line. There was actually a bit of a bold move in there as well, because there's a world in which the Debbie could be buffed up further to higher attack numbers to take down that Magnus, and that would have been a really big problem. So, buying up some more items, and the question is, where do these guys deploy? Decides to go one into the left and one into the right. This is part of the reason why I also feel like the Jamoy dying in the center lane would have been attractive, because you can put something like, okay, we do decide to go with the black hero in the center lane. That's good also because it means that if you do happen to draw multiple assassinates rather, that you can deploy them in lane 1 and lane 2. And then Assassinate is just such an important tool in it. Now, I mean, it is unlucky that he hasn't been able to pick it up by now. You would have thought he would, because in fact he's been drawing a lot of cards and trying to get through his deck effectively. But now we're back into this Helm of the Dominator kind of standoff. Here we can activate the Helm of the Dominator to steal that, which I think is actually just a mistake given the fact that we have a bear that can come out on behalf of the, right here, and I feel like you kind of want to stop that from happening, almost. So you actually don't have to, you can just like put the hourglass down and then see what your opponent does. So if he does end up going for that piggy value. Interesting sequencing decision there. I kind of would have preferred that. So anyway, we do get some serious damage in there, but we also, once again, can see that this Beastmaster's Vesture of the Tyrant is going to slow things down dramatically. I mean, that Beastmaster is just totally out of control at this point. 26 health as a result of that uncontested, the Stonehall Cloak just gaining life again and again and again. That Slay coming out in order to deal some extra damage is quite a nice little touch there. It just feels like now things are totally slipping away, and that these heroes have grown out of control for hype. They just had more resources than that. And we do have the Blink Dagger, and it's interesting that he didn't end up using there. There were some possibilities, I think, but I also respect not needing to do it. I really like using it here, though, of moving it into the right lane in order to pressure, but we get a hip fire first to set up, hopefully, a kill. Yeah, it gets the Keenfolk turret. So that was actually a good play. Like, playing the Keenfolk turret on the left lane to set up that hip fire plus the Keenfolk turret in order to stop Sorlikon from doing anything, like killing her with initiative, is actually quite an attractive play. So I really like that one. Does eventually play out that Blink Dagger on the Sven, moving over to the left lane to try to set up a kill on that tower, and it'll be pretty hard to defend that, especially given how little attack we have on the right lane. So we get the Arm the Rebellion here, which does add in a little bit of damage, but not quite enough. It's not going to do it, I don't think, here, given the fact that the game is very likely to end on the next turn. Does have access to a little bit of gold, not enough to buy that Vesture of the Tyrant, though. Hyped is already made a lot of decisions and is moving in with Debbie on the left lane, trying to secure the game. Okay, so we get this setup basically means that any one of those heroes is able to get through is going to win the game for it. We have a hip fire in Hype's hand. This can take out the bounty hunter. Now, Rob has to have some sort of, yeah, like he has a card draw here. I was hoping for a creep of some sort that can block things. We actually have an interesting decision here from Hyde. He decides to not play out the Disciple of Nevermore, just play some other kind of fluff. And the reasoning why is to force your opponent to stop making plays so that you can just set up a kill. Because if your opponent plays, for instance, a removal spell or something like that in order to block you, that would be devastating. So anyway, let us start by talking about some of the moments in the game that I thought were interesting, and let's start by talking about the decks. Now, one of the problems in this kind of analysis is I don't exactly know what happened. There's, of course, the draft. So anything that I like I say here, I always want to preface it by saying that just because there's something that I don't like about these decks doesn't mean that it's wrong that they're in the decks necessarily. Like, it's possible that one of these guys had a tough draft that led to things not working out exactly the way that they wanted to exactly, so not being able to see what happened there makes it hard to really critique it in terms of what was right and what was wrong. What I can say, though, is that I really see some very serious problems in Rob's deck. So it's a 3-faction deck, or 3-color deck, rather. So green, blue, and black. I'm noticing very quickly from previous games that I've watched, and then this one as well, that the 3-1-1 composition has serious problems. It's actually pretty reliable that you see them stranded with cards in hand and they have a harder time to function because they're just way more inconsistent as a result of that, because half of your deck is going to be pulled in different directions. There are also some serious, I feel like also you need to have a card quality advantage over a 2-colored deck. Like, if I just were to average out the card quality of both of these decks, I actually think they're kind of pretty similar, all things considered. Maybe Rob's deck is a little higher because of those assassinates in there, but they're honestly very close to the same tier. And when you have that and you're on the 3-color deck and that they're on the 2-color deck, they have a massive advantage against you. So that's kind of a macro picture of what I'm seeing here. But there's some particular numbos that I find a little bit annoying. One is that Rob has a lot of card draw and a lot of gold generation from what I can see here. We have 3 copies of Foresight. We have 6 copies of Track, which are, of course, a result of the Bounty Hunter. You can't really help that. You have a copy of Payday and a copy of the Ironfall Goldmine. So that's a lot of passive cards. There's a lot of cards that, they don't affect the board. They're kind of passive. They're situational in their own capacity. So that's a bit of a problem when you add that on top of the fact that you're playing this 3-color deck as well. Like, if you don't, you're going to be less reliably having access to a color of card that can affect the board. Now, card draw does alleviate that a little bit, but Foresight's just not great card draw because it's just so expensive. You feel that in the course of these games that it's hard to sneak it in, quote unquote. There's another particular problem that I'm seeing with the deck, and that really is just how it comes down to both blue and green being pretty lackluster in their card quality individually. I think that the black is honestly pretty good. It's just had we just kind of even had a little bit lower card quality in the green and the blue, had them in one color, I would be really happy. But what is it like for instance, green? What is the green card that you're getting here that you're excited about? I'll take you a minute to just look at the deck. Is there anything in here that you're like, this is a green card that I am excited to have in my deck? I honestly don't think that there is one. And the closest being Arm of the Rebellion, and particularly Arm of the Rebellion, I want to just emphasize that there's just not a lot of creatures in this deck. Not a lot of creeps specifically in this deck. The only card in this deck that generates multiple creeps is Dimensional Portal. Obviously, that combination is sick. But this is a 3-color deck. Getting a blue hero and a green hero in the same lane to deploy both spells is like a magic trick. That's borderline miraculous for that to be able to line up. So all of these things considered, I think that, like, it's not like there's necessarily, like, a problem card. Just the overall composition and structure, it makes the games and makes the deck feel really clunky. And you notice that as you go through the course of the game. You can go back and watch it, and there's no fluidity. Everything is super rigid. He's kind of just, like, has, like, 2 options, it seems like, in every lane, even though his hand is just stacked with cards. And that partly is because of decisions that he made about, like, where he's placing the green and the blue heroes, but also just because of the fact that he's under a lot of pressure early on in the game and doesn't have the luxury of being able to set things up and protect them necessarily. On the other hand, I think that Hype's deck is a very solid red-black deck. You do have a high density of these gold generation effects, and I think that the rest of the deck is pretty proactive and pretty disciplined as a result of that. I like that in these econ decks. I'm kind of seeing is that you want to have, like, you have a chunk of cards that's associated with this, like, econ management nonsense, and then the rest of the deck is just affecting the board. I like that. Not strictly speaking, like, there's a little bit more flexibility than that, but it's largely just focused on the affecting the board. Now, there's one particular card that I am going to highlight here, and that is the Stonehall Cloak, because it becomes very relevant in this next play. So what happens from this position actually is, and you're actually seeing it on the board right now in the image, is that Rob has set things up where, I mean, first he plays the Ironfall Goldmine. Hype does nothing. He actually, Hype started off the turn by playing that Smeevil into the lane, so he just, is passing. So Rob now has the option to play the battlefield control to align the Bounty Hunter to attack that Beastmaster. Or he can just pass, are his options. The decision to use the battlefield control gets blown out by any health item in the game, because he's going to be dealing exactly lethal damage on him given this current setup. And so, like, I mean, it's not like a huge blow up, but it really dilutes the effect of something like that card. And I think that particularly Stonehall Cloak is kind of an annoying one. You would rather kind of stick that in your opponent's hand and not give them a chance to play it in this position. So by playing it here, you're risking getting hit by the Stonehall Cloak. But the thing is you actually paid attention closely to the gold allocation, you should be almost certain that he has exactly Stonehall Cloak in his hand. It's in his deck, and you can see that it's in his deck. You saw that he spent 5 gold, and there's literally no other 5 gold item in his deck. I think that's actually probably really important in playing Artifact, to, like, keep a notepad with you. They were joking about this at the start of the match, that Hyped had a notepad with him. I think that you should just do that all the time and note down things like gold totals, because it's just a really difficult thing to keep track of. And in this situation, it matters. How much gold did Hyped spend last turn? In this situation, he spent 5. He has 1 5 gold item in his deck. It is the Stonehall Cloak, and that blows you out here. So very high chance that he has that. Now, there is, of course, the outside possibility that he bought a demagicking maul in the secret shop. That seems like a bit of a stretch. Like, it's probably not the kind of item that he wants here, especially in a deck that has a copy of Payday that's there. So it seems pretty unlikely that he would be banking on that. So not the demagicking maul. There's also other health items that cost 4 plus you could hold something in the secret shop. In addition to that, like, that's the other possibility that could cost 5 that gives you only 1 item like this. So there's just your opponent has a health item in hand 98% of the time, and about 95% of the time it's exactly Stonehall Cloak, which is basically the worst item in the game for you in this situation, the worst response imaginable, and he goes for anyway. Now, this might seem like a big, thing. It's like, well, I got the damage in. That's kind of a nice thing to do. It has a lot of advantages and can hopefully set up a kill in the future turns. The problem is this battlefield control is just a super powerful card to be able to actually, like, set things up, and your deck is clunky and you have these problems. So using a cheap card like that has a lot of effect in different junctures in the game is a I think, a serious misstep. So, I mean, serious is a bit of an overstatement. It is a subtle misstep that has some interesting and important implications later on because he doesn't have access to that battlefield control. So I think that he just kind of undervalued that a little bit. I mean, I don't like I'm trying to force out the Stonehill Cloak. Maybe I just didn't think through that line of logic, which is fine. Like that, this is a nuanced thing, and I have the luxury of all this time to think through things. But that's an important note to bring about. So let's move on to one of these next clips. So we're going to be moving into the shopping phase in a moment, and there is actually a mistake that Rob made, and it's not like a thing of like an opinion. This is actually a true, undisputed mistake, and I want to see if you can catch it. We're just going to watch it through, and then I'm going to talk about exactly what happened here that was wrong. So watch what he does. Buys that, buys the fountain flask, and then passes. Okay. So you can go back and watch that again in order to catch what was wrong if you didn't have a chance to think about it. And I'll even give you a brief hint if you didn't think through it. It's the tap last idea. It's the point is, what you actually saw there is that Rob bought from the secret shop first. This is actually always wrong to do if you're going to be buying something from the center shop as well. You don't get any other options after you buy something from the left-hand shop. So when you buy from the center shop, though, you do have additional options sometimes below it. In this game, it didn't make a... I mean, it kind of made some differences. Like, it was possible that maybe that Cloud Stream Hourglass did more work over the course of this game for it, but particularly, I mean, you actually saw him do this a couple times over the course of the game, but in this particular instance, the reason why I'm harping on this is because he could have bought the phase boots, and then there could have been a vesture underneath it, and he could have purchased that. And given the way in which the game was going, I feel like a vesture would have really helped to, for instance, secure the third lane, slow things down, secure the first lane, and slow things down. It just would have done a ton of work. So it wasn't there, but he wasn't punished. But this actually just was a flat mistake, especially given the fact you've got through a bunch of your item deck already. Your chances of getting it were pretty significant. Like actually, like 1 in 4, given the fact that you see that there's the phase boots there, and that once you get below that, there's a 1 in 4 chance that the vesture is the thing that's on top. So, like, you had a 25% chance to get an item that was way better than the Seraphim Shield. Like, I mean, like, just think about it too. Like what does it do? Like it does everything better than that shield, I think, because the +3 armor is like -2 attack in many instances. But better. Plus it gives rapid deployment, so it's pretty messed up. So this I'm just like harping on this because this is a point that is a hard rule. There's not a lot of hard rules in Artifact. I'm pretty sure this is a hard rule, that it is always correct to buy from the center shop from your item deck first, assuming that you're going to be buying from both, or for multiples of them. It also applies to the right one too. So that's an interesting point there. And there were just a bunch of points over the course of the game where I felt that Rob's management of the economy could have been different. He kind of was just buying stuff up. Like in the early turns of the game, you'll see a clip that's up right now about him just like buying up the barbed mail, which is like fine, but I feel like, I mean, you have a copy of Payday in your deck. You're trying to put up enough money for a vesture. Like, that's a lot of money to do, and if you were able to purchase that at any point in the game and you actually saved any resources in order to do that, maybe that could have turned things around, but didn't end up going that direction. But anyway, that's all I had to say about this game. A little bit of a longer one, but hopefully you found it interesting. Of course, please send me feedback. I'd love to hear all of your thoughts about all of this. It's been a lot of fun to do these. I'm going to continue doing them. And of course, also check out the sponsor of Ink Gaming. Thanks again to BTS Artifact for all of the stuff that they do of putting out these videos that I can use. And I hopefully will be able to use my own videos very, very soon. Also, anybody in the audience, you have questions, you have suggested videos that you want me to try to do, I can try and do them. I've been trying to focus on these ones that are a little bit easier to do to begin with, to kind of get up to speed and improve my abilities for it, but I feel like I'm catching up and learning a lot over the course of doing it myself. I don't know about you guys, but I've been enjoying it. Send me feedback, join up with all of the social things. I know I'm right here at the end, but I have a lot to do, so just thanks for hanging out. Talk to y'all later.